Back in 1968, he was a revolutionary, a 17-year-old committing his life to the revolution to help Black people and people of color all around the world by starting the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party. Now, Elmer Dixon is a global diversity consultant, best-selling author, TED Talk speaker, and amazing person who's here with us today on Book Talks. I am so excited, Elizabeth Ann Atkins of Two Sisters Writing and Publishing, to present our best-selling, phenomenal, powerful author, Elmer Dixon. Welcome, Elmer.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. We are so proud of you here at Two Sisters Writing and Publishing because you have this amazing story that we had the privilege of sharing in your book that just came out, Die Standing. Die Standing. And Elmer, it is so powerful. It's your life story. It's about how when you were 17 years old, you looked into the coffin of little Bobby Hutton, who was shot by police bullets in Oakland, California, and you said, that could be me. And you joined the revolution. Can you take us back to that moment, Elmer, how you felt and how you were ready to give your life for the cause?
You know, it's still kind of, when I think about it, surreal. The era back then was so different than society today, you know, with the backdrop of the civil rights movement, growing up with that backdrop and the emergence of the Black Power movement, and I'm Black and I'm beautiful. And here I am, 16, 17 years old, along with, you know, my brother, who's a year or so older than me, my younger brother, and of course the people at that time, just in general, and traveling to the Bay Area for the first time. Anyone who has recollections of Berkeley and Oakland and the Bay Area, it was always kind of in the lead in kind of new thinking and new age. When I say new age, I mean, you know, just kind of on the cusp of what was happening at that time. You know, with the hippies, the yippies, and of course the emergence of the Black Panther Party. And the night before, we were attending the West Coast Conference of Black Student Unions at San Francisco State University, and we had no idea that the chairman of the Black Panther Party was going to be speaking. I didn't know who the chairman of the Black Panther Party was. We had heard some things about the Black Panther Party, you know, while in Seattle, but we had no idea. And it was really at that point when Bobby spoke to the crowd, because he was flanked by bodyguards, one who was actually wounded in the shootout with police, with Eldridge and little Bobby, and he was on a crutch, had been shot in the leg, and Bobby was mad. He was visibly shaken and mad, and he gave a very fiery speech, one unlike I've ever heard before, and talked about our blood running in the streets, building a revolutionary movement to avenge those who had been murdered and slaughtered along the way, and in particular, little Bobby, who was 16 when he joined the Black Panther Party, the first member to join the Black Panther Party, and the first to die. And when he finished speaking, you could almost see the proverbial line drawn in the sand for those that were afraid to death and those that were ready to, you know, to join the struggle. And it was a small group of us, my brother and I and two or three others, that made a beeline to Chairman Bobby, and told him we wanted to start a chapter of the Black Panther Party. we had no idea what we were getting into, other than we just, this is the path that we wanted to take.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
so he told us to come to Oakland the next day.
mm-hmm,
He wanted us to see what was building, because when little Bobby was murdered, just before then, the party really was growing out of a small local organization. It only had one chapter outside of central headquarters, and that was the Southern California chapter in LA, headed by Bunchy Carter and John Huggins. And so when little Bobby was assassinated, the party just grew in leaps and bounds almost overnight.
mm-hmm,
And so when we drove across the Bay Bridge into West Oakland and started seeing these formations of young black men and women in leather jackets and berets in military formation. It again, as I described the scene, it was really surreal. That
uh-huh.
I'm sorry, I'm just making sure that my phone doesn't ring again.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. So you
Go ahead.
describe it very vividly in the book. So the book is Die Standing by Elmer Dixon. It is available on Amazon in hardcover, paperback, ebook. You can also get it at barnesandnoble.com and anywhere books are sold online. It's powerful. Elmer poured his heart and soul into this book. I edited it, we published it, and it's now number one bestseller in the history of the Pacific Northwest. It also is ranking very high on the list of the discrimination in law enforcement list on Amazon. And it was right by President Barack Obama's book. So we're very proud to say that as well. And it's phenomenal. And Elmer shares all of these stories in his new TED Talk, which he did at the University of Tulsa earlier this year. And I'll put the link to purchase the book as well as listen to the TED Talk here in the description box. So Elmer is living history. The photograph on the cover became one of the most iconic images of him in the Black Power movement of the 1960s. He's standing on the steps of the Washington State Capitol holding a rifle with his Panther comrades. They were protesting the right to bear arms because, Elmer, can you take us to the root cause of this? It's to protect Black lives from police brutality and also to provide education, nourishment, protection to the Black community.
Yeah, this is actually the second time a demonstration like that took place in California, in Sacramento in '67. The California legislature was trying to pass the Mulford Act, which was going to limit the ability of Panthers to carry weapons in the open, and we were doing the same thing in Olympia. But the reason why we had weapons, and one of our very first survival programs was a police alert patrol, in which we openly carried shotguns and had law books to make sure that as we patrolled the police, that they weren't murdering people in the streets, because we had our legal right to do so. But we were not only demonstrating the right to bear arms, the right to assemble, but also it was important to demonstrate to the Black community that we had a right to defend ourselves. We had a right to stand up against police brutality and oppression. This was not something that we had seen much before, but it did happen before. It happened at Black Wall Street and ended sadly in the murder of over 300 people. There was a group in Alabama that preceded us, the Lowndes County Freedom Association, where Black men took up arms to defend the community against the Ku Klux Klan. So we were really taking the next line, our position in history, to stand up and declare that we were going to defend ourselves, that we were not going to allow you to continue to brutalize and murder and rape our communities. And so we were demonstrating that to the Black community.
Mm-hmm. So powerful. And sadly, many of those themes are relevant today, and especially during the 2020 social justice movement reignition after the George Floyd murder, which exemplified the need all the more for the 10-point program of the Black Panther Party in 1968. So That leads to what you do now, Elmer. You are president of Executive Diversity Services, and you provide diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting for companies, corporations, organizations, universities around the world. Can you talk about the work you do now and how your foundation as a revolutionary back then helps you do what you do today?
Yeah, I talk about the foundation that I was going through unbeknownst to myself, growing up in a melting pot neighborhood, being exposed to different cultures, largely because of our parents, my father in particular, how that really laid the foundation for me to become a Panther because you mentioned Black and people of color. We struggled for all oppressed people, including poor whites. In fact, we had a coalition with several white organizations. We started the first Rainbow Coalition. That was not Jesse Jackson who coined that phrase. That was Fred Hampton, our murdered leader in Chicago. And so our struggle was about all oppressed people. And so we had this multicultural platform. And little did I know that that was going to launch me eventually into becoming a diversity consultant. As I took a path through being the EEO officer for the Seattle Park Department. That was really a major step, learning about EEOC, and that caught the attention of the two women that formed EDS, and they brought me on as one of their trainers, and I became a lead trainer for the company and now president. We've been in business 36 years, but I need to point out that it's the consulting piece is absolutely a critical part of what we do in helping organizations put together strategic plans, in DEI strategic plans around how to build inclusive organizations. But a large part of it is the training, because just because you have a program in place, leaders do not know how to automatically inclusively lead. Managers do not know automatically how to be inclusive and equitable in managing people from different cultural backgrounds. So it's a process to educate, re-educate, to unlearn and relearn. Society, our culture has lied throughout our history, and people have been raised to think that there's one way to do something. That's the dominant cultural central norm that we talk about, expanding beyond that and embracing difference. So our work is about helping leaders embrace difference, how to become inclusive leaders, how to become create more equitable and inclusive workplaces. And that's the challenge that we have embraced over these last 36 years and continue to set examples for as we work with our clients.
I love that, Elmer. I love that. So, what are some of the takeaways that people can have when they read this book? Everyday people who just want to learn more about history and also race relations and action steps they can take today to make things better.
I think the first and most important thing for me is exposing the lies and the myths about the Black Panther Party and Black Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
There was such fear that was spread through established media, through law enforcement, the FBI, the CIA. These are people that murdered people, not just in the United States, but around the globe. They went in and murdered leaders in Africa because they were opposed to their point of view. And so we were then said to have been the ones that were the terrorists. If you look at the forward that is done by one of my friends and colleagues, who is a former police sergeant in Ireland, who said that he had learned that that we were the terrorists. We were labeled as terrorists. And so the perpetuation of this demonizing of the Black Panther Party and its members, this is the most important message for me, is to people to understand who we were, that we were ordinary kids and who did extraordinary things as we were growing up and facing down the biggest terrorist in history, I know people don't like to hear that, but if you look at the history of this country, the brutal racism and the crimes committed against people, the annihilation of Native Americans and genocide committed against Native American people in this country, and of course the demonization of Black people throughout slavery and beyond, the incarceration of Japanese during World War II into concentration camps in this country. We have to come to grips with our history and acknowledge the things that have occurred in the past in order to move forward. So the book helps people to do that. It helps to all of those things to really see that we were freedom fighters. As a consultant, and the messages there are that in order to continue our growth and not go backwards, that leaders need to lead organizations in an inclusive way. And there's several steps that I take people through, but it's really understanding that that people can stand up. You can be counted. You can be, you have to hold those that are responsible for our well-being accountable. And if young people don't do this, you may not be able to breathe in 15 or 20 years. In 20 years, I'll be close to 100. My mother is 98 and has survived, oppression in this country and has survived the conditions within this country. And, she's approaching the century mark. And when you think about young people today, are you going to have a chance to live a full life and a healthy life? Well, you better stand up and be counted and measured as a person, and make sure that you hold people accountable and stop chasing, the Beyoncés, stop chasing the what is it, the Bachelorette or whatever all of that crap is on TV. Start looking at what is happening around you and make sure that you're going to have a life to live. And the message there is that you can make a difference, because we made a difference in the Black Panther Party.
Yes, yes, so powerful. And it's all chronicled in the book from the very beginning when you were in high school and you heard Stokely Carmichael talking, and that roused you up and awakened you. And you lived in an era of assassinations, Dr. King, President Kennedy, Medgar Evers, Emmett Till, and you witnessed all of this sadly, and you just were awakened to the need for you to take action and make a difference. And that you did. Please read the book. It's so good. And you know what, Elmer? One thing yes, there we go. Die Standing Elmer Dixon. Yes, I love that cover because it shows you as the revolutionary with the rifle, and then you in the executive diversity look corporate. And it's so powerful. But I love how you also showcase the egalitarian foundation of the Panther Party, because there were many women in leadership. There were many women in leadership roles, and they were honored and respected. Can you talk about that?
Well, the fact is that over 60% of the members of the Black Panther Party were women. And it's not just about being in a leadership position, but it's about being on the front lines, because the sisters did the same thing that the men did. When we went on police alert patrol, and in the first police alert patrol that Huey and Bobby put together in Oakland, there was the first woman to join the Black Panther Party was on the front lines with them, Tarika. And she was an artist and had her art displayed in the paper, but women, played the same role. They carried the weapons, they cleaned their weapons, they worked in their survival programs, they organized in the community. It was the day-to-day rank and file. Certainly women rose to leadership in the party, like Elaine Brown became chairman of the Black Panther Party, but it's the rank and file members that really were the heart and soul of the Black Panther Party, who did the work day in and day out. And as I said, 60% of our members were women. So women were an integral part of the work that the Black Panther Party did.
And Elmer, why do you think it's so important for people today to learn about something that was happening in the late 1960s?
People need to know and understand history. I speak to high schools, universities, grade school. The most exciting group that I talk to are the first and second and third graders. They're just so alive and energetic. And I always recommend, in fact, I was talking to a group of first through fifth graders here a couple of months ago, and I told them, don't just believe your teachers, question your teachers. And the teachers were sitting there, and they agreed. They agreed because they want the kids to explore, to challenge their minds and look beyond what the textbook says. And I always recommend that they read Lies My Teacher Told Me
Oh
to
my
get
gosh.
the truth. And so it's about the reason why it's so important is to uncover the truth. People don't know the truth.
Right,
And they need to know the truth. You can't just trust what someone is telling you is good. There's a movement among racists in this country to try to erase slavery, claiming that it wasn't so bad, to try to eliminate discussion about what they're calling critical race theory, which is BS, from classrooms and boardrooms, so that people just kind of play along with the status quo. It's what they have always done to try to maintain control over people. And we cannot let, DeSantos and the rest of these racists pull the wool over our eyes. We can't let it happen. We have to challenge them and push back. They don't, they pass some ridiculous law in Florida that says you can't say gay. What are you living in are we living in draconian times? Well, it appears we are. And so we need to challenge that. We need to stand up and say, no, we're going to know the truth. We're not going to let you just feed us what you want to feed us. We're going to explore and understand. And if, regardless of whether you're a Republican, Democrat, independent, regardless of whether you have a conservative leaning or a more left leaning, you need to explore and examine. Just don't take it for word. It's not about political lines. It's about understanding truth. And go to talk to the people that you don't know, that you don't have experiences with. That's why people have so much unconscious biases, is because they stay away from people that, and they grew up around a void of people that are different from themselves. And so they get these insulated ideas. And so a lot of our work in the classroom is around challenging unconscious biases. And one of the ways that you do that is interacting with people different from yourself, with whom you have the biases about. That's how you grow. Doesn't matter, what your political persuasion is. You need to grow and understand and learn from people, and not just take it from what someone told you about someone, but go learn yourself.
Elmer, can you please share some examples of what is an unconscious bias?
A good example of an unconscious bias is that women can't lead. And people unconsciously, they'll say, well, women, we'll put them in leadership if they qualify. Yes, they're good, but there's still this unconscious bias, and women hold this unconscious bias about themselves. I've seen it before, where women in an executive boardroom, a senior VP, a break will come along and she'll get up and say, I'll get the coffee, because she assumes that that's what she's supposed to do. Now, women who are conscious of that will not do that, but often unconsciously women will do that. Black people, when you think about unconscious biases, Black people still to this day, when the data came out about unconscious biases, and keep in mind that unconscious bias doesn't mean that you're racist. It means that you have a preference for one over the other. And the first data said that 85% of whites in the United States have a bias either in favor of their own color or against African Americans. And when I read that, I said, well, that's okay. I can understand that, because if that's what you grew up around and that's what you're used to, you have a bias. But a lot of people aren't aware of it. But the next piece of data point right below it said that Black people, 65 to 67% of us, have that same bias against our own color.
Wow.
Yeah, when I saw that piece of data point in the early 2000s, I said, Here we go again. See, it's what Stokely said, in 67. Here we go again.
Mm-hmm.
We hate the fact that we're black because we're conditioned to think that black is bad. When you look at back in the 90s, I read an article that said that when images of violence are shown in the media, not just gun violence, violence in general, 65 to 67% of the time they show black men. So if you're constantly seeing that, then of course you develop an unconscious bias. People see me and they cross, a white woman may see me walking down the street and cross the street, and clutch her purse. My son-in-law, former son-in-law, who's a doctor, he was here when he was in pre-med, studying with a famous doctor here at the University of Washington. He was, before he met with this doctor, he had gone to Nordstrom to buy a suit because he never had a suit. This guy grew up in the 90s, and he used to dressing like 90s kids. He didn't have no suit, and so he needed a suit. And my oldest daughter was working security. She was a security manager for Nordstrom. And she's in the booth up where all the cameras are, and she hears a bell go off, and alarm goes off in the booth. And she says, "What's that?" And she looks on the camera, and it's him. It's my son-in-law, my at the time son-in-law. So she goes down to see what's all the commotion about. And they were red flagging him because he had a couple of credit cards to charge his suit, as if he had no right to have a credit card, and he was flagged. That's unconscious bias,
Wow, Elmer.
That's it, so it's everywhere, and people don't know. I don't know why this thing is continuing to ring. It's everywhere, and it's pervasive in workplaces, in hiring practices, in promotions. I can't tell you the number of women in leadership positions who have told me that they have to be more like men than the men themselves in order to succeed.
Wow.
And
Wow.
and so unconscious biases, they run deep. All of us have them. But when you're in a leadership position, when you're in a role that you're responsible for hiring and promoting people, it has deadly consequences. Even in the healthcare field, the very first clinic that we started was a well baby clinic. And the reason why we started that clinic was because in the Central District, the Black community back then in 69 and 70, we had the second highest infant mortality rate because Black women were not getting not only access to healthcare, but they weren't being told that they were at high risk. Well, today, that same dilemma is happening to Black women in this country. We just had an Olympic athlete
Horrible.
die alone in her apartment, because her doctor did not tell her that she was at risk for septemia, or whatever the disorder is that Black women are more prone to. And so that same tragic circumstance is happening again. You just asked about why learn about history. There's a perfect example. And the doctors, then of course, that don't give her that information, there's some kind of bias going on there, unconscious, whether it be conscious or unconscious. And so the consequences can be deadly, as in the case of police, stopping a young Black man or woman. The Sandra Bland case is a perfect example. And so here she is with a broken taillight, and an hour after she stopped, she's dead in a jail cell. Should not have happened. And so people need to step up. I know that there are people that push back, but when you look at what happened with George Floyd, and you look at the global reaction, people had enough, but people fall back into old habits. And that's why history needs to be, we need to look at it, we need to remember it, and we need to take action.
Beautiful. So Elmer, what are some other things that you want people to take away from the book in terms of the future and what we can all do, armed with the importance of cultivating diversity, equity, and inclusion everywhere?
Yeah, I again, I think it's realizing that you can make a difference,
Mm-hmm.
that no matter how big the obstacle, when we took on the United States government, when we were named the number one threat to the internal security of the United States. And part of the reason that they used was that because when we were feeding these thousands of kids a hot breakfast every morning, regardless of what color they were, they said that we were indoctrinating them. Well, the truth is that we were indoctrinating them with pride, with dignity,
Mm-hmm.
telling them that they were relevant, that they were smart, that they were
Mm-hmm.
intelligent,
Mm-hmm.
rather than what they would hear either on the playgrounds or in the school itself
Mm-hmm.
from teachers, but that
Mm-hmm.
they were relevant. And so we embarrassed the federal government into feeding kids a hot breakfast in schools. A lot of people don't realize that, who grew up after the Black Panther Party and went to school and got a free breakfast or a free lunch in school.
Mm-hmm.
People don't know that that was because of the Black Panther Party.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
See,
And
see, see, this is the difference that we made. One of the examples of the difference that we made. And our free medical clinic that we started in 1970, it's the only existing Black Panther free medical clinic in existence today after 53 years. But see, we set the example. Even Obama had to say, we need Obamacare. So we were 50 years before Obamacare.
mm-hmm.
We made a difference. And the message is that you can make a difference. No matter, you don't need an organization of 1,000. You need a committed few people
Mm-hmm.
that can connect with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Today, young people call it allyship. I don't know if they fully understand what that means. We built coalitions,
Mm-hmm.
but working together to change and challenge the dynamics. The message is that you can make a difference, that you matter.
Mm-hmm.
That's the
Yes.
primary message out of my book.
Oh my gosh. Everybody watching, please read Die Standing by Elmer Dixon. It is so, so very good. It starts when he was born. It's got amazing photos. We have got like 100 pictures in this book of his family going back several generations. And the Black Panther Party photos are amazing. And then there's also his current photos in recent years. And this book is so enriching. It's going to change your perspective. You're going to learn so many things about the Black Panther Party that you probably didn't know, or that were, as Elmer said, skewed by media coverage. So please read it. You can get it anywhere books are sold. You can also go to twosisterswriting.com and read more about Die Standing by Elmer Dixon. And you can also see some of the events where he's going to be speaking, because Elmer is a global diversity speaker. Can you talk about some of your trips to Europe this coming up, Elmer?
Well, yeah, last year I was given an award, which I accepted on behalf of members of the Black Panther Party, because we don't take individual awards, from the oldest student organization in the world, the UDAN at Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland. And I'll be returning there to sign books this fall. I spoke also at a college in Birmingham, UK, and I have to mention this story. Two young men, black men, brought their mother down after the speech to say hello to me, and told me that she fought with Stephen Biko in South Africa, and that she usually didn't want to talk about it because she didn't like to brag. And I told her, and I knew that it wasn't about bragging. She was modest. That's that culture that she's from, a modest culture. You don't put yourself out in front. And I told her that was something that she needed to be proud of, and to make sure that people understood why they fought. And she told me that the reason why they fought, that they rose up, the thing that inspired them to rise up, was the Black Panther Party.
Wow.
so,
Wow.
So that, when you think about the far-reaching, people don't know that we had an international effort struggle back then. We had a chapter in Algeria. That was our international office. We had
Mhm.
chapters in Sydney, Australia, and New Zealand, both of places which I'll be visiting. And I'll be going back to the UK. We had a chapter in London. We had support groups in Denmark and Sweden and the Netherlands. And I'll be going to those places to sign books, also in France. So we had an international reach. And I'll be signing books there, and I hope to make my way into South Africa at some point as well.
I love it, Elmer. You are such an inspiration. Everybody, please check out Elmer's book, Die Standing. Then please also check out his TED Talk. I'm going to put the link down here for you. It is so powerful. And he did it at the University of Tulsa, which, of course, the Tulsa Race Massacre is a horrific flashpoint in American history that we all need to learn more about. So it was really symbolic that Elmer's first TED Talk happened at University of Tulsa. So Elmer Dixon, any closing remarks you'd like to share with people watching?
Yeah, I would just like to say, remember that the power belongs to the people.
Mm,
Fred Hampton said that what we need is white power for white people, brown power for brown people, yellow power for yellow people, uh, and black power for black people. All power to the people. It's about a collective of people standing up against oppression, racism, and knowing that we can make a difference together. That's the message.
beautifully said. Thank you very much, Elmer Dixon, best-selling author of Die Standing, and also TED Talk speaker and global diversity consultant. I wish you the best, Elmer, and I know this is just the beginning of many amazing things to come with this book.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And
Bye.
everybody, again, please go online and order Die Standing by Elmer Dixon. It is a phenomenal, phenomenal book. Thank you for watching. And please share this interview with anybody who's interested in these topics and who needs to learn more, because we all do, and we all have the power to make a difference. Thanks for watching. I'm Elizabeth Ann Atkins with Two Sisters Writing and Publishing. Please do visit twosisterswriting.com. Thank you and happy reading.
Thank you. You're frozen.
Yeah, I see that. Oh my gosh, frozen. I guess that's to emphasize